Hello everybody and welcome to the first video in our series of videos on the 1798 Rebellion of Ireland. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know the three main religious groups in Ireland at the time. You guys should know what the penal laws were and how they affected Catholics and Presbyterians, and finally you guys should know how the US War of Independence contributed to defending the volunteers and what the volunteers achieved. So in this video we are going to look at what Irish society looked like around the time of the 1798 rebellion and some of the causes of the rebellion. So the last time we looked at Irish history was around the time of the plantations, where the British monarchy tried to replace the Irish with people loyal to the crown. We saw this in the unsuccessful plantations of Laois and Offaly and Munster, and the highly successful plantations of Ulster in 1609. And finally, we saw the traumatic and violent Cromwellian plantations in the 1640s. After these plantations, there were attempts to overthrow English and Protestant rule, especially in the Williamite Wars in the 1690s, where Irish Catholic supporters of King James II were eventually defeated by the Protestant supporters of William of Orange. Now, there were three major groups of people in Ireland during this time before the 1798 rebellion, and the first group was a Protestant elite known as the Protestant Assembly, and these people, they dominated political, economic and social life at this time, and they all belonged to a specific Protestant church, the Church of England, and these were generally very wealthy people. They were also the only people allowed to vote and be elected to Parliament in Ireland. Parliament in Ireland at the time sat in College Green in Dublin, so Ireland had its own Parliament. Now, the largest group in Ireland, religiously speaking, were the Irish Catholics, who made up the majority of the population. They were discriminated against by the Protestant ascendancy, and this discrimination was enshrined in the penal laws that were introduced after the Catholics' defeat in the Williamite Wars in the 1690s, which we just saw. These laws, they denied Catholics property rights. They couldn't buy land that had belonged to a Protestant. They couldn't vote. They couldn't be elected to Parliament. Couldn't have weapons, and couldn't marry Protestants. They also couldn't have a horse of a greater value than £5. So they were discriminated against in many, many ways. The final group, religious group that we're going to look at, is the Presbyterians. These were another Protestant church who had come from Scotland, but they suffered discrimination under the penal laws too, just like the Catholics. The Protestant ascendancy really were the people in charge. So, like the colonists in America, both the Protestant ascendancy and the Presbyterians began to develop an identity separate from the English, with many now identifying themselves as Irish. Remember, when we were looking at the US War of Independence, the colonists began to see themselves as something other than British, and the Irish were also experiencing this. When the US War of Independence broke out in 1775, many Irish supported the colonists' demands for greater say in taxation and trading rights. However, when the French joined the war with the Treaty of Alliance in 1778, the Irish turned against the colonists because they feared an invasion from France. Now, most of the soldiers in Ireland were actually sent over to America, leaving Ireland defenceless, and all the money in the Irish Parliament all the money that they had collected from taxes was used by the English to fund the war with America and its allies, primarily France. So with no defences and no money and the possibility of an invasion, the Irish, and particularly those in Ulster, they began to raise volunteer forces, simply known as the Irish Volunteers, who drilled and trained themselves. Soon, with the threat of invasion past and over 50,000 armed men in the Volunteers and no British troops on the islands, the Volunteers began to use their position of strength to demand a change in their trade restrictions that had been imposed on them by the English, just as the Americans had done. They wanted to be able to export goods like wool, glass, leather and other goods directly into the colonies. Remember, everything had to go through Britain. So with no other choice, the English had to give in to these demands. They had no way of countering the Volunteers. And this really is the first step towards rebellion. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know the three main religious groups in Ireland. You guys should know what the penal laws were and how they affected Catholics and Presbyterians. And finally, you guys should now know how the US War of Independence contributed to the founding of the volunteers and what the volunteers achieved. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.